and you've just exposed yourself. This is what I'm talking about, people. This is what I'm talking about. Can you just get your whānau down here to help us out, bro? Low socio-economic demographic been dealing with a lot of these issues. I mean, living it hard, not specifically climate change, but they've been dealing with living it hard for decades.
Kia ora e wha koutou, haere mai ki te kōrero, te ara whānui ki te rangi, ko Oscar Toko Ingoa. I'm here with Voices of Aroha and Ihaia. Kia ora Ihaia.
Kia ora, Oscar.
We go way back. I first studied in your class and then we became awesome friends, and I've learned something from every conversation we've had. So would you like to talk a little bit about your mahi?
Yeah, first of all, that's a terrible lie.
That's the truth.
I was your student. You were posing as a student, infiltrating the class. Oscar is an alien from another planet. He is here to save us.
I've got my spaceship parked at Space Place Planetarium. I learned a lot in that class, for sure. We studied the wild water management.
I learned more, and so did the rest of the class. You're losing. Do not just... No, let's go backwards. You're the man, bro. Straight up.
Oh, kia ora e wha. It's great to have the time to kōrero with you, for sure. And we can chat about so many different topics and so many different things relating to climate. I think we're pretty established on the science. The IPCC's been screaming the same kōrero since the 1990s. And the effects are only happening faster and faster. So which part of the climate kōrero do you think we should focus on today?
I think at this moment in time, the main issue with climate change is obviously the climate changing.
It's a lot, bro.
But I think in terms of the way humans fit into this planet, I think the main issue now is mental health. Absolutely.
And I think there's so many avenues of mental health and how it intersects with climate. We know about climate anxiety. I think there's a lot of people out there who are feeling like they don't either know what to do about it or know where to put their energy, but they're concerned about it. They want to do something about it. But this is also an opportunity to acknowledge all of those other climate emotions. Like, there's climate confusion out there, there's climate depression out there, climate fear, climate shock, awe, and grief. There's some big emotions when it comes to climate.
It's funny because, it's funny, but it's not funny. But of all those things, which should be really strong feelings to motivate yourself, it's quite satirical that the main motivator is insurance.
Money.
So, massive elephant in the room. There it is over there, look. And so when people realise, I mean, insurance companies, it's funny, and that's the main element, if not the only one, in the capitalist system that totally adheres to the climate change science.
Absolutely.
Because they're struggling themselves. And
they're at a point where they can't sustain it anymore. They're like, there's so many examples where the insurance companies are pulling back, even if claimants are being paid.
Bro, the main insurance company now is the taxpayer.
Yeah.
After Gabrielle, Hawke's Bay, we got a nice little handout. But you know what? I'm happy to do that as a taxpayer. Use our money to help out those communities that need it, because the insurance companies have told a few things that haven't eventuated in terms, guaranteed peace of mind. Come on.
Yeah. Pay your premiums and we'll pay up. But it's either PS
you got
and
to fight to get your payment, mate. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And what do whānau do if they're like, just before an emergency they pull out and they don't finish those insurance things? Like there's the LA wildfires was an example of that happening, like on a crazy scale, to even the wealthy tiers, and everyone's in this together. And I think in terms of Gabrielle and the earthquakes and the natural disasters, New Zealand's already faced the Auckland floods. We're still dealing with those impacts,
Well, the low socio-economic demographic been dealing with a lot of these issues. I mean, living it hard, not specifically climate change.
There's a lot of
but
people
they've been dealing with living it hard for decades.
Absolutely.
So they're probably, in terms of understanding that hardship, they're probably better equipped to deal with that than, say, the people who live in coastal properties and riverbank properties and clifftop properties. Those three areas, the insurance companies have been saying you will not get any insurance in the near future, and those of you who can pay for it now, you will never get a payout.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I
no
love
future
that honesty,
developments?
refreshing honesty from the capitalist insurance industry. They're basically saying you can keep giving us your premiums, but
We're not gonna. There's only so much they can do.
we have indemnification because it's not illegal to be a mug.
Yeah, I think that's true. And from an insurance point of view and from a finance point of view, I think climate action is really challenging because it's expensive upfront and expensive over time to maintain, but it only gets more expensive the later we leave it. And the longer we prepare and the more we can line up these systems, the more resilient they'll be. But that requires early investment, and that's a delicate balance, especially with New Zealand's socioeconomic pinning. Like we're kind of trapped as a farm for kind of China, Australia, and the UK. So there's minimal agility for us to respond to climate within those current frameworks, and all the budgets are just so tight for everyone.
Well, you know, talking about mental health and insurance, I think it was last year, maybe the end of the year before, there was a community meeting up the Kapiti Coast about managed retreat. I think it was their first attempt at having a community meeting. And of course, all the people in the nice coastal properties, you know, these people worked hard for their coin and got some nice properties on the beach.
Absolutely.
You know, they collectively were saying, no, we're not moving. How dare you try, you know what I mean? It's like, guys, we're not asking if you want to move. You kind of have to move. Best to plan now. But yeah, so the reaction you would hope to have had was not the case. It was in fact the opposite. And that's when I think, you know, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, but if that's got something to do with the thinking, is that not a mental health issue?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that there's so many different definitions of ownership and what that means, and how do we connect to the land that we're on. I think there's so many dynamics when it comes to like coastal retreat or managed migration or climate refugees or any of those topics. Like how do we manage those topics? Like who makes those decisions, to where, when does that happen? How neighborly are we when we get there? Or do they just get to set up their own rules? Or do they get to stay there? Like
they're just playing out this long-held belief that we're not part of the environment, that we're disconnected from the environment. And so when that's the kind of thinking that's, you know, the general population, what it means is they don't realise that the environment, whether it's a quake or a downpour of rain or a tsunami or flooding or whatever, those elements are actually not people.
they're a force unto themselves.
We, you know, all cultures personify those things, right? But they're not people. And so it's utterly indifferent. The environment is utterly indifferent to what we think or feel.
I think Cyclone Alfred that hit Australia is a great example of that. It didn't care about the borders of the Queensland, New South Wales, or like who it impacted. But you're right, it's a force of nature that's going to play through the system.
And, you know, there's that kind of terminology too in insurance documents and, you know, all the legal proceedings around that. They use those terms, force of nature and act of God.
Yeah,
all those kind of things.
P.S. We're not going to pay.
Yeah. No, that's right. So, you know, when people are really upset when these events happen, you kind of hear in the thinking and the words, it's like, oh, you know, the rain, they're talking about the rain doing it to them, or the flooding doing, you know, a monster wave, all these kind of terms, and it's like, well, no, it's just being what it is. And it doesn't have a feeling.
It's not targeted.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't have a beef with us.
Yeah.
It's not saying, you know, I'm going to get you. But that's the kind of the thinking that humanity has. It's like, why is, you know, and even some people who are deeply religious, like, why are you doing this to us, God? You know, we did a prayer of supplication that you wouldn't harm us, but it's like, no, that's actually isn't what is happening. That's just how the environment operates.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I think there's a degree of the environmental mechanisms playing out how they have and already and will do play out. I think there's an element of human comeuppance that's coming home to roost, that we've kind of unlocked natural processes that might have been dormant for longer periods, or we've just changed the system's rhythm.
It's just subliminal arrogance, eh?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And in the name of progress.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We like to think that we're a intelligent species, but, you know, if you were like you from another planet that came down here to do an assessment, you'd think, these people are stupid.
It's been very interesting so far.
What is going on?
Absolutely.
Yes, I understand, like, you know, with your species, you know, coming here is like, people say, why don't they make contact? Why would they want to?
Well,
You know, they'll be like, we'll come back when it's all over and the show's all over.
There's a couple of lessons humanity needs to learn, and we'll come back later for sure.
And I mean, you know, another point of disconnect is that we don't realise in terms of the lifespan of this beautiful planet, Papatūānuku.
Kia ora.
Right, we've been here for like if the lifespan of the year of the planet was 1 year, we've only been here for the last second on New Year's Eve.
Yeah, bro. And I think to put that in perspective, like the climate that we are currently moving into hasn't been seen in the last 800,000 years. You know what I mean? Like we have to go back quite a few different Earth chapters to find a parallel to the amount of CO2, to the temperature, to the sea level rise that we're heading into. We have to look to kind of 2 to 5 million years ago to find a equivalent time when the world was behaving with an active hydrocycle. You know, like, well, I don't think we're fully ready to live in a world with a fully active hydrocycle. Like Australia in a hydroactive world is swampy and marshland, you know, not desert, you know, like it's going to rewrite some boundaries on a scale, on a planetary scale, you know, and we also need to think and respond locally, but also on a planetary scale.
Well, you know, there's a lot of aspects of climate change, but if we just take one of those, sea level rising, you know, the clever people of the world have given us a figure of, is it 67 metres if both ice caps melt?
Yeah, well, 70-ish.
I mean, we don't really know.
There's a lot
in
East Antarctica.
We'll just say pretty high.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that puts Petone Beach up in Taira.
Yeah.
And that puts Machu Island underwater.
I think 72 metres of sea level rise is an enormous number, right? But just to quickly put that in perspective, we don't need it to be that high for it to be an issue. You know what I mean? Like one of the most important lessons I learned at uni was from one of my glaciologist lecturers, who was saying a 30 centimetres of sea level rise increases the frequency of a 1 in 100 year flood to happen every year. With 1 metre of sea level rise, that 1 in 100 year flood happens every tide.
Damn.
We're not ready for that. You know what I mean? If we're talking about like 1.5 degrees already, if the Paris Agreement was passed last year and like sea level is like climbing and that is the return rate that we're going to get on sea level, like it doesn't take a big number to have a big impact, especially when it comes to ice melting, especially when it comes to water. Water contains so much energy and it can expand when it's heated. Like there's so many different elements to water. Earth is the only planet that has water in all 3 states, as a liquid, as water vapor, and as ice. So when all of those elements are active and excited, it's a really active planet to live on, you know?
And you've just exposed yourself. This is what I'm talking about, people. This is what I'm talking about. Can you just get your whānau down here to help us out, bro?
It's going to take light years, bro. We're trying to help where we can, for sure. There's a few different corners to this puzzle.
Well, the thing is like, you know, we have a lot of these discussions, bro?
Absolutely.
And what I like about it is we're really upbeat about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I like to think we're realistic optimists.
Absolutely.
But with each day, that's kind of eroding you
I
know,
think-
when we see the level of inaction, I mean,
I think it's probably
there's a lot of stresses on society these days,
Absolutely.
and I've heard a few young people. When I say young people, people in their 20s, teens, talking. I remember Timothy Paul was telling me one time. She was like, "Oh man, I don't know if I want to have children."
yeah,
And I
bro.
was like, "Man, I get it, far out."
It's a big part
And you
of the
hear a lot
mental
of
health
people
corridor.
talking about that, eh? And I
Absolutely.
think that, well, all I could say to her was, you know, the kids born into this mess actually won't know any different other than what they've heard from older people or from, you know, footage of whatever. I remember when I was a kid in the 80s, you heard old people talking about how things were different when, you know, 80 years before or whatever.
The
When they were,
Walkman?
yeah. A cassette tape. No, actually, that was my time. No, much, you know, I'm talking about Kaumātua that I knew who grew up in like the 20s, 30s.
Like the phones where they plug it
40s.
into the different neighborhoods.
Yeah,
bro.
well, in those days, no phone, bro. No phone,
Yeah,
no car.
true.
No car, bro. Less development, less people in this country. Yeah. I mean, just in that this one century,
The world has changed
just
so
made a
much.
meal of it, eh?
It's changed so much, bro. So much. Exponentially in the past 100 years.
Yeah, and so I suppose what I'm saying is that we really need to recognise our failings by mass self-deprecation as a means to be aware of the problem and then, you know, make the change that is required. But I think now, in terms of making the change, the adaptability, like you say, bro, that bus is gone. It's gone. So now we just have to prepare for
Absolutely.
the storms.
I think preparing for the storms is a really.
I mean, they're here
interesting
now,
process.
right? They're here now.
Absolutely.
More so in other parts of the world than down here. But, you know, we get a gnarly storm. It's pretty gnarly.
We're right in the middle of two pretty major storm tracks. So if either of them move either way, then we're in the line.
I mean, when I think about Gabriel, if it had hit Wellington,
Not ideal. Not ideal.
and, you know, with mathematical probability, you should really assume that one day a Gabriel will hit Wellington.
Well, I heard there's two reasons why storms are going to happen more often and get stronger as temperatures warm up. Like, not only is there more water and more fuel to fuel these storms, but the wind shear, like the wind is heading in the same direction more often. And if we have a baseline temperature that is creeping upwards, we only need 26.5 degrees to start a cyclone, you know? And that all of that warm water from the tropics is just creeping towards New Zealand. How many years in a row have we had heat waves around the country? Like, you were mentioning earlier that, like, as the sea level changes both in height and in temperature, it has some really major impact on marine ecosystems. And marine ecosystems that people use as livelihoods and food sources and cultural assets, and these are big changes.
In terms of preparation, I think we really have to send a task force over to Cuba.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, Cuba, they are poor in terms of their financial wealth, but they're so rich in many of the other forms of wealth, their knowledge,
Social welfare.
their systems, their infrastructure, because they had their oil,
Agricultural
most,
system.
you know, 80-90% of their oil taken away from them that's 35 years ago, bro, 1990. And it hasn't changed since. They've adapted in a way that, I mean, it's the only case study you can study
Well, I think
to see how you can best
live in a
prepare.
world without fuel or without a heavy reliance.
without fuel, and you're in an area of the planet where you're copying some mean cyclones, bro. So, you know,
Some
they
serious force over
reckon
there.
their response time is unbelievable when they know a cyclone's coming.
Amazing.
And most years they have 0 fatalities.
Amazing.
Whereas in America, a lot of people are dying. I don't know the number, but, you know, it's quite a few. But, you know, one death is enough.
I've been watching America's weather quite closely recently because it's kind of changing in real time, and they have a lot of unique weather over there. But it is, like, it's fascinating the degree, like, there's a lot of people over there who's doing a lot of great mahi to map all of this out. We've got amazing surveillance of these storms. We know exactly what they look like, where they're coming from, how they're behaving. But then, like, does the buck stop at surveillance? Because it's like, get home, and if you're not home, then get home, and stay home. And if, like, there's no, like, raise the flood walls, there's no, like, activate the pumps, there's no, like, recharge the aquifers or, like, disperse, like, there's just, I think there's more we could do to prepare, especially if there's parts of the system that we know is going to happen. Like, if we take LA as a great example, like, if they know that wildfires are part of their ecosystem, then why do they only have 2 of those hydroplanes? One of them got taken out by a drone.
Damn.
Like,
Really? I did not know that. They only had 2 planes.
they only have 2 of those planes, bro. It's like, if they have as much money as they do and as hardcore a military as they do, then, like, why is the rest of that infrastructure not as fleshed out?
They can't just modify some military planes to help out. No.
Well, like, you'd think, right?
Big choppers and stuff.
But I suppose
crazy.
you need the workshop to be able to do that. And, like, for example, Texas, it snowed in the Gulf of Mexico, in Texas
nuts.
and Florida. And America, they have countries that snows, they have infrastructure that snows up the north, they have trucks that sort it out, all good. But they didn't have any of that process or infrastructure or even tools to be able to switch out the trucks in Texas. They were just, like, completely ill-equipped. And speaking of that, it looks like New Zealand's trying to prepare itself, generally speaking, for the geopolitical international stage, which is really heating up right now, but also in socio and other ways. I mean, yeah. But the New Zealand government just released a $12 billion defence budget, and it's saying if they're willing to chuck all that money at defence, then, like, where's the climate mahi that is arguably more of a threat? Like,
Well, if we use war as a metaphor, not unlike the story of Gilgamesh, bro.
yeah, bro.
Fighting the environment, bro.
Yeah, bro.
Chop all those trees down.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And,
I mean,
and the
if
story
that-
of Rata.
Oh, bro. Yes. Oh, yes. Yes. Those are the messages that we need to take on board. I mean, because, this is uncharted territory. We've never been here before. Or maybe you have, I don't know, in terms of history not being known, but I don't ever think we've had...
I think this is
are we at 7 billion on the dot now? Are we
I think
a
we're
little
past
under,
that,
a little
bro.
over, but over? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's such an interesting time at the moment. And while I'm certain every historical age has faced their challenges and had their tools to respond, I think we're unique in the amount of different challenges that we're facing and with the tools that we've got to respond. Because in some ways our tools are, like, super sharp, we've got, like, high tech in some ways, and they're, like, really blunt and old school in other ways. Like, for example, you would know a lot about this. Actually, I learned this in your course, how old school Wellington's plumbing and sewage infrastructure is. It's from the Romans, bro. It's like flush into the river and watch it go. That's it. Like, we've got scope to update that file, you know what I mean? And it's like, especially if we're expecting population growth in Wellington, like, it's not just about the economics that will bring. We need to level up our infrastructure, our waste management, our water management, all of our food security, all of those things, our energy generation. We need to preserve those things moving forward.
Yeah, I can't help thinking that there'll be a shift where people who have friends or family in a rural area might drift out that way.
Absolutely. My friends in whānau are planning on, like, pooling our resources and getting a piece of land, and, like, everyone gets a tiny house each, but we'll make a community garden, chill area,
Or people who can afford it, who have a house in the urban areas, but also have a rural lifestyle block where they go for holidays.
Yeah.
Call it a batch. Not even a batch. It's a
Second
mean-ass house, but
Luxon.
in a way, they go there to reset and seek some leisure. But subliminally, I think it's always been a place where you can retreat to when the times are getting bad. We have a whakatauki, ka mate kainga tai, ka ora, kainga rua. Don't just have one abode, have a second one to back up.
I think that's
as a
true,
backup,
bro.
You know what I mean?
Have multiple safeties. I think that's a really important point, especially for the community. Like, if there is, like, climate change is happening, then how do we be prepared as a society? How do we have civil resilience?
Well, even if you have, say, a backup home in a rural area, there's no guarantee that's a silver bullet. The rural areas, they go through some shocking droughts, flash flood, and then some more droughts, and so that's a different infrastructure, of course. But I've been to places up the East Coast, bro. Peak summer, It's because he's got a truck and a water fill up their tank.
True.
You know?
Super
So,
dry up there.
Yeah, so when you get that situation, it's like, wow, we've got, lucky that we're in Wellington. Man, we've got more water in Wellington.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Well, I think the East
3
Coast
cities,
is
4
interesting
cities.
for their hydro management. Like they've definitely used their groundwater reserves to like irrigate all the crops and all the vineyards and all the industry over there, which is amazing. But it's at a point now where it's sinking, and like the land is sinking because it doesn't have the buoyancy of the groundwater to uphold it anymore. I think we're like groundwater challenges are also an issue for us to be aware of in Wellington
Oh,
too, right?
bro.
Like fragile infrastructure.
Yep. So fragile.
I think one of the main things I've heard about the pipes is that we need more money to put more pipes in the ground. And I hear the more money part, but do we need to put the same pipes in the same and like kick the same can down the road 50 years, or are there any other ways that we could manage our hydro infrastructure?
Well, we haven't really taken note of what a lot of other countries are doing there with anaerobic digestion systems. We actually contain that sewage.
Absolutely, and make it a food for the next process. Like circular waste management.
Well, you got free gas. Don't have to buy any. You can just produce it yourself, from your own body.
And
That's a huge untapped energy source.
enormous potential.
And because you can't just dig up the whole city and change all the pipes, you can change the system by just by not connecting to those mains anymore and actually disconnecting and getting your own home biogas system for your own home. And so you're just eliminating that problem by disconnecting.
And I think eliminating that problem and also opening up other opportunities. Like we can heat water twice as fast.
Yes.
We can process those waste products into other usable products. I think
And I mean that that's still not a silver bullet because we don't want to be burning off a whole lot of methane, which was pointed out.
we were chatting about that at the
in our
Aroha
class.
climate hui, the effects of methane, how it's up to 80 times
Oh,
better
bro.
as a thermoconductor than CO2.
Yeah, and that's one of those massive elephants in the room, mate. That Siberian permafrost they've known for a long time. If it starts destabilising and thawing out, then we're in some serious doo-doo.
That's a big tipping
and
point.
it's there now. It's defrosting.
Absolutely.
So
I think
that's the new horror movie.
we're not ready for the effects of methane, I think. And you're right that the permafrost are starting to play their cards. I think methane is also interesting in terms of New Zealand's responsibility because we're so hardcore on dairy that like we need to
7
address
million
that.
dairy cows. Wow.
Which is an amazing asset for us in some ways and also quite an enormous responsibility and arguably liability in other ways.
Oh, 80% of our rivers you can't swim in it, drink out of. So
No one should have to pay for water, bro.
yeah, large part of that is those dairy cows. Yeah, and that's just weird, eh? Why did we let ourselves get into such a big problem? And I know there's, plenty of scientific research that it's done for and on behalf of the dairy companies that say, no, look, we're fine, we're doing all right. It's like, bro, go and drink out of that river then.
Yeah, and they're like, no.
Come on, mate.
No.
This is some Aaron Brockovich stuff,
Absolutely.
Give
I
yourself
think
an uppercut.
This is an extension of an issue that I think New Zealand faces in a lot of areas where like we have so many beautiful things about this country in so many ways, but we sell the golden goose and then buy the eggs back at a premium
Hey.
so often. It's like, why don't we just nurture our own goose here? Like that makes no sense to me in that process. Like water is a big part of that. We sell it off to China and buy it back, We sell it off really cheaply.
Yeah, that's that capitalist system, eh, bro? It's all part of the education system. So, it's not true education. It's just full-on indoctrination into a belief system, eh, where you stay disconnected to the environment.
Well, this education system was designed as a arguably babysitting tool for people to factories, like run the factories. Like their parents would go work, and then while the kids are at home, you might as well teach them how to read and write and do
Teach
numbers.
me how to play Monopoly.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that's an evil game, man. Far out.
Lose friendships immediately.
That brings out the worst in people, eh? You
that
know,
was
they want to make you homeless and bankrupt.
Yeah, that's a real gangster mentality.
You know, who made it is, but that is so gangster. Who made that game up, man?
I believe that game was made up in irony. Like, it was actually established as a tool to teach about capitalism, and then just like became the most capitalist game ever. Well, I think capitalism is a big challenge that as part of all of this, and I think that feeds into the mental health kōrero. People having jobs but also having purpose and work. And I think the distinction between those things is really interesting. Like, work being more described as where the world's needs meets your skill set, there belies your vocation. You know what I mean? Like, that's your work, you know? And I think there's a lot of noisy jobs, but like, how do we reprioritize on the work that we actually need to do, you know?
I wonder if it's like this. I mean, I got no hard evidence, but you read about some nations how they've got issues with their birth rate, and when they do the calculations, they're in some
serious
even
issues.
China, even
In Japan,
China,
like their population pyramids are all inverted, and it's
that's trippy, eh? Who's gonna look after all those old people, man? Far
absolutely.
out.
And the thing about that is that it, like, this whole capitalist system, like, yeah, cruisy retirement whenever that happens, but all of that is dependent, nice pension, all of that is dependent on people coming up through the ranks.
Funding
and if
it.
not, people aren't coming up through the ranks, or if the jobs are changing, or if all of those socioeconomic factors change, then that's a really precarious model, you know? I think it is starting to fray around the edges.
And then there's like the concept that those older, you know, middle-aged generation, my age and older, it's our fault. You know, we put us in this predicament.
Oh,
and
I
it's
think
like,
this has
hey,
been
come on,
building-
stop pointing the finger.
This has
Fellas,
been
can't get
building
off
for
your phones,
centuries,
mate.
bro.
God.
You could argue that climate changes are an extension of the colonial process, you know, those globalization efforts. This is bigger than one person, you know. It's been building for a long time.
Well, you know, civilizations have risen and fallen. Apparently, the research says on a lot of climate change affected, you know, variables.
That was the defining factor, bro. Like, if the environment changes that you can't sustain your population or your energy production or your food sources, then like
all those
major
cities that they're finding with the LiDAR scanning right across the Amazon jungle
Absolutely.
in Central America, it's like, wow, check that out, man. You take away those trees and it's like, they're so huge, it's like, of course it's going to collapse.
Yeah, absolutely. Or if there's a drought and they're like, and you don't know how to deal with droughts, and that has been defining moments for a lot of civilizations.
You know, I just hope that we have a change of mind where, you know, we have to be aware that we have to be responsible ancestors.
Absolutely.
And that's tough because that's hard to see into the future.
We need to make the world a better place than we inherited it for the next generation.
Yeah, all that stuff. But how do we do that, man?
I think we got to colour in our corner, you know, and do what we can do for this equation. I think it requires an all hands on deck approach, you know.
Wartime effort, I'd say. Wartime effort, as if we're like fully in a third world war. I mean, we're not close off.
Well,
not far off.
I
it
think
now, but
when we're defining when we're in a third world war, I think is a matter of historians to discuss, because we're kind of already there.
Yeah, I would argue with
Also,
that, right?
Jacinda Ardern declared a climate emergency in 2019. Like, we should be at that kind of like wartime mahi-tahi energy, but it's like the most relaxed, chill emergency ever. It's like, back to the cafe, I'll meet you on the
I
coast.
suppose locally here, that's the culture. She'll be right.
Yeah.
Be right, mate.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's not going to be.
I think the time frames that it's going to pan out on is probably not going to be all right in the long term. I think we've got windows that we can make differences. I think we really need to capitalize on those moments.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the mental health issue, we're kind of talking about the issue of addiction.
Absolutely.
And the drug or the crack is consumerism. Just
That's
useless
sweet
stuff,
money.
mate. Just useless stuff.
Yeah.
It's always that battle of purchasing things that you want versus purchasing things that you need.
I think that also feeds into the insurance conversation. Like, that's just another mechanism that kind of keeps the wheel spinning. Like you need to get a job so you can pay off your mortgage and you can pay for your insurance, and like you need to sustain this model that we're in. But I think sure money has its place to play, but I think there are other priorities we can focus on.
Well, if day-to-day life is an addiction of consumerism, we should be setting up some sort of rehab forums for that addiction, isn't it? You know,
Absolutely.
You get around in a circle and
We need to chat about this.
And you know, because the first part of it, of any kind of rehab is to admit you have a rehab. You know, you got to stand up and say, "Kia ora, everyone. My name's Ihaia, and I'm a consumeraholic."
Absolutely.
And I'm even talking about, you know, the people in the who might regard themselves as green. That's actually kind of delulu, because we're all consuming, some are on different levels.
Absolutely.
I would have to say in this country, in terms of carbon footprints, you know, it's my relatives who live in the Urewera forest and the off the beaten track rural Māori communities, because a lot of them, there's no power.
Yeah, they're self-sufficient.
There's no Wi-Fi, you know, there's no shop.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only consume if there's a place to consume. If anything, their main role is to try and keep the pest numbers down in terms of pigs and deer.
Wow.
And some of those big forests like Te Urewera, I mean, all those kazis up there, they're hunting, but that's such a big forest.
That's a big mahi.
You still have to drop some 1080 here and there to try and, because, you know, you just can't clean out that place of when there's pig and deer populations. I'm not even going to mention possums. It's just a horror story, but far out.
Issue.
I would say, you know, you're talking about the defence budget before. That's a war worth fighting. Just use the army to go and do the pest control. You know, get all the infantry. They got all the gear, man.
I think
and they can do it all day, all night. They can just have, you know, that heat-seeking scope and even rats. I was watching a YouTube. I was thinking about this, so I watched a YouTube clip on in England when they've got, you know, massive rat problems in warehouses and that. These guys go in at night
with all their Navy
with infrared scope,
gear.
with high-powered air rifles, and just picking them off, eh? And the freaky thing is, as soon as they shoot one, another one comes out and starts chewing on his bow. And they shoot that one, and another cuzzy comes out and starts chewing on both of them until there's a big pile of dead rats, eh? So, you know, if we had, and this is just a couple of guys going through a warehouse, so if you had our whole army armed with that and just swept through those forests, and actually with the possums, you're taking the possums out, get them to have people behind them to take them in for the fur and the meat and the leather. You know, you can recover some costs actually.
Use what we can.
And if anyone can do it, the army can do it, because they've got the logistical,
absolutely,
you know, capacity to because and you treat it like a war. Every night and every day you're going out to kill the enemy.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting point to like pick the battles that we're fighting. You know, and I think like which levers of change are we trying to action to implement what change we're looking for, you know? And I think once we start pulling our toolkit, there's a lot we can kōrero.
Well, even if you use the army for like pest management, I reckon there were people, you'd see an increase of reservists.
Yeah.
Oh, but I want to get in on that.
Yeah.
Get in on that, go waste some possums, man. It's not that I hate possums, but...
As a passive income.
Well, you know, I feel sorry for them in a way. They didn't bring themselves here. So, you know, whoever brought those animals here, just give yourself an uppercut too.
I mean, I think there's a lot of different accountabilities, and there's so many different challenges that we face. I think between us, we have all the tools we need to...
But how many times have we theoretically saved the world?
Oh, every time we chat, bro.
Yeah. So actually, that's mental health again, because we're a bit delulu. We are, bro.
I think you do need your collaborators in this space. Like, climate is a massive challenge. There's so many different moving parts, and we definitely need people to kōrero with it together. So I'm so grateful that we can chat, bro. I mean, there's so many different levels that we can chat on, and I'm so keen to keep chatting. And there's so many more layers that we can unpack. I think, unfortunately, we've got all the time filled for this interview today. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
The last thing I would say is, if you've got friends or family in a rural area, but not just any old rural area, a rural area where there's some good supply of water.
Water's going to be huge,
right? And I'm talking about the foothills of a lot of the ranges, because on the flat land it's all paddock.
And knowing where the catchments are, bro.
Yeah, and so a lot of those ranges, like the Ruahine ranges, the Tararua ranges, you know, all those other ranges around the country. At the foothills, before you go out into pasture, that's the place that you want to settle, eh? And so if you've got someone, your friends or family who are on a farm in those kind of areas, start reconnecting with them and get on with them.
Absolutely. Build the community now. Like,
Yeah, because there might be a time when you're going to have to leave your urban ivory tower
I think that's
and get back to basics.
and knowing where to go is super important. And that's good advice, bro. Thank you so much. We have a tradition at Voice of Aroha to answer a question from the previous guests.
Oh, yep.
So this one is for you. What is one story you feel made a big part of your story of why you're here today?
Oh, that's easy, and I've already mentioned it. Meeting you. Come on, bro. It's funny because when we have this little discussion about, you know, you being from another planet, it's hilarious how you just try and play it down, bro. It's hilarious.
What of you guys?
Well, if the other people that were in that class were here today, it would be so noisy in this room about how, you know, we could just add layers and layers of that point. I mean, you're laughing now, bro, but you're not fooling me. You're not fooling me. Bring in the cavalry, bro. We need some help from our whanaunga who are from other planets. And I know you are.
I know that there's nothing I can do to convince you otherwise, but I too am really grateful that we met, bro. I'm so stoked that we can chat, and there's so much more we can chat about. I look forward to all of those conversations as well. That's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for coming, Ihaia. It's always great to chat with you. Awesome. And you'll be able to see this episode on our YouTube channel and all our socials. Keen to hear what you think in the comments. Thanks so much.